I just listened to every album by Iron Butterfly, and here are my thoughts. So going into this, I knew literally nothing about Iron Butterfly. I had heard the name, and that was it. I didn't know what to expect. Some of my preliminary research, I had found that they are credited for possibly founding, at least popularizing, a subgenre of rock called acid rock, which I think is just another form of psychedelic rock, although it's typically associated with being a little darker and a little more grungy, whereas the term psychedelic rock has the opportunity for being very bright and cheery and flowery. Acid rock is a pretty good description for what they are, especially not just with the psychedelic music movement happening at the time, but their lyrical content. A lot of their lyrical content boils down to, I dropped acid so I know more than you. But I really liked going through Iron Butterfly. They are a little bit less of the kind of band where you specifically seek them out because they were so amazing and they wrote such amazing songs. And it's a little bit more like if you're specifically in the mood for that vibe, that kind of music that they do, then this is one of the best bands to put on. I don't know if that made sense, but it makes sense to me. So Iron Butterfly starts off in January 1968 with an album called Heavy, and I thought this was a pretty good album. A couple of songs that I took notice, especially Unconscious Power, which I believe was the first song from this album. That comment I made earlier about how a lot of Iron Butterfly's lyrical content boils down to, I dropped acid so I know more than you, this is one of those songs. I just double checked, it was actually the second song, not the first. But all of the songs were pretty good. It'll definitely give you a feeling of like a more twisted version of The Doors, or like a nightmarish version of The Doors. They don't really waste any time releasing a second album in June of 1968, even though only two founding members are still with the band, Doug on keyboard and vocals and Ron on drums. The other members had been replaced. This is the album they're really known for, though, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. You may wonder why it's called that. I wondered, so I did some research. It was supposed to be In the Garden of Eden, but when they were recording, they did one take where the vocalist was supposedly so drunk or so high or both that he couldn't form the words properly, and when he sung it, it just sounded like In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, and they thought it was funny, so they kept that. This album is their crowning achievement, though. I liked every single song. They were really in the zone for recording this one. They kept a really solid and strong vibe throughout the whole thing, including the famous album's title track, which is one of the catchiest riffs that they had ever written. Even though this title track is like 17 minutes long and includes a long drum solo, I was engaged the entire time. Speaking of that, I actually have a question for you guys, and I'm hoping you can share in the comments. If you were listening to a classic rock radio station and In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida came on, would you rather it be the original 17-minute long version with drum solo and everything, or would you rather it be the single version that was like 3 to 4 minutes long and just covers the main riff and verses? If you know enough about it, then please do comment. Let me know. 'Cause like I mentioned before, I am building a playlist for this stuff. They released Ball the next year in 1969, and to me, although largely this album sounded similar to the two that came before, it leaned a little bit more in a Doorsy direction. So it had been cleaned up a little bit. The sounds were generally a little bit more cheerful. At least that's something that stood out to me. They released another album in 1970 called Metamorphosis. At this point, the guitarist that had been with them the previous two albums had left, and they replaced him with two other guitarists. And I thought Metamorphosis was about as good as Ball, maybe a tiny bit better, because it was maybe just no particular reason. They were both really solid albums all the way throughout, but I felt like the highs on this album were maybe a little bit higher. This album is also recognized for having one of the first uses of the talk box in rock, a talk box that was later popularized by people like Peter Frampton and Bon Jovi. So at this point, the band actually breaks up for a few years and then officially reunites in 1975 although it is without Doug, their keyboardist and lead vocalist and main songwriter and founding member. But it does come back with one of the founding members, Ron, on drums, and then Eric, who was their guitarist on In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida and Ball, comes back as well. These two albums released in 1975, Scorching Beauty and Sun and Steel, they had awesome album covers, by the way, but they were pretty different. They didn't sound a whole lot like Iron Butterfly at this point. And that's not to say that there weren't songs on these albums that I really liked that I'll share with you at the end of the video, but I got the feeling from these two albums that they went into the studio without much of a plan. They had listened, it was almost like they had listened to several bands that were popular at that time and just kind of made an amalgamation of generic 70s rock at that time, and just recorded and released it. You know, it wasn't very cohesive, and it didn't sound a lot like the Iron Butterfly that we'd come to know up to this point. Again, though, there's a couple songs out of these albums that I did really like that I'll definitely be sure to share with you. And those are the 6 albums that Iron Butterfly have released. My album ranking, I'll make it pop up right there. Funny enough about Iron Butterfly is that they have gotten back together so many times since their last album release, just as a touring band. And if you look on the Wikipedia page, I think I counted a total of 60 band members in their history, because they just get together, sometimes with original members, sometimes without. But they stayed touring to play all their biggest songs. But that is it. Thank you for watching, and here are all of my favorite Iron Butterfly songs.
Forever, let this carry you wherever seen. Come here, woman. Don't you know that I love you? Here I come out of Vita, baby. Don't you know?